Welcome to Good Books Radio. We have a great book for you this week, Think and Grow Rich for Women by the well-known Sharon Lechter. We're going to talk to her in just a minute, but before we get to Sharon, I want to thank audiobooks.com, our underwriter, where your first book is free. Sharon Lechter's new book, Think and Grow Rich for Women, is based upon a really famous bestseller from long ago called simply Think and Grow Rich. Sharon's approach to this is to say women relate to money differently from men, and so she has a book specifically to teach women how to grow their wealth. Sharon, welcome today. Now, I noticed that you have been on the President's Advisory Council for Financial Literacy under George Bush and under Obama. Tell me about that. What is that?
Well, it was a great honor. As we all know, the economy in 2008 took a huge dip, and in 2007, President Bush had realized that we really needed to do something about financial education, and I had the honor of being invited to be on the first President's Advisory Council for Financial Literacy, so I served both President Bush and President Obama. And in essence, part of our problem in America is people are either masters of their money or slaves to their money. Mm-hmm. And certainly with what happened in 2008, a lot of people who thought they were masters realized that they became slaves very quickly.
Yeah, that's true.
And so my personal passion since 1992 has been financial education and financial literacy, and we really need to get financial education within our school system so we can properly educate our children for the financial world that they face.
I've said for a long time that they should have a required consumer finance course in high schools.
Absolutely. Just last summer, I live in Arizona, and we did successfully get a bill passed in Arizona requiring financial education as a graduation requirement for high school students. And I'm hoping that we can see that happen across the nation in all 50 states.
Wow, that's magnificent. So you got a required course, legally required, for all students in Arizona.
It is a required curriculum within, sometimes within an economics class, but yes, financial education is a required curriculum for high school students.
Well, as a professor at a university, I've been surprised often at how students are so ignorant when it comes to just simple things like interest rates and what it means long term.
Absolutely, and in fact, I just recently finished a college curriculum. We'll have to talk about that again offline.
Okay.
Because I do believe every college, particularly with the amount of college loan debt that students are saddled with, that we really need to be teaching them how to deal with their money and how to properly utilize that debt.
Well, I always like to tell my freshman students that they can be a millionaire. They don't have to win the lottery. They can absolutely, with confidence, become a millionaire if they'll just put away $100 a month right now at 18 and keep it up until they're 70, and they'll have $1 million.
Absolutely, and unfortunately, so many of them don't heed your advice, and we just need to continue drilling that home so people understand that they are literally the ones making the decision of whether they succeed or not because of how they use their money.
Well, what is the, you've written, this book is about Think and Grow Rich for Women, and we're going to get to that in a second, but since you've dealt with the broad universe of both good and bad approaches to managing money, what are the mistakes that most people make with their money?
Well, usually they put their head in the sand and they don't really know where they are financially, and they try to ignore it. And the advent of the credit cards has certainly given the ease of credit to people that causes them to get themselves dug into a deep hole, and then they have a hard time ever getting out of it. So part of it is, the answer is very simple: spend less than you earn. Mm-hmm. Most people even laugh when I say that, but that is the bottom line: spend less than you earn. And unfortunately, because of the ease of credit, so many people have gotten themselves where they've spent more than they have, more than they earn, and they end up heavily in debt. And so it's a matter of, as I grew up, my father said, a map doesn't do you any good if you don't know where you are and where you want to go. Mm-hmm. And most people have no clue where they are financially, so they have a really hard time planning for the future. And so the first step is to get a plan and understand where you are financially today and how you can start moving in a forward direction.
Well, unfortunately, the U.S. government isn't setting a really good example at this.
Well, that is definitely for sure. And if you look at the projections of what our entitlement programs are going to do to our debt, it's pretty frightening.
Yeah, it is. It is. Mm-hmm. I've always tried. Maybe you know how to do this. I've always wondered if you could take the national budget and you put it into an analogy of, say, a family of four making $100,000 a year. How big would the debt be for a family of four, analogous to the U.S. debt? Would you know a number like that?
Well, it would be a really big one, and it would certainly be frightening. The last estimate I heard was that our national deficit was, towards the $50,000 a person or something ridiculous. So, at the end of the day, mm-hmm. I try to tell people that if you pay attention to your own personal wallet, mm-hmm. and you take care of your own personal finances, then you will make a positive impact. Others will see you and they will emulate you. Then you'll be able to make a positive impact on your community. And, that's where it all starts at home and being smart about your own personal finances.
What do you do for children?
Well, children, I personally am very, very engaged in making sure we educate our children. I have several programs. I created a board game called Thrive Time for Teens that teaches teens that every decision they make either drives them towards success or failure and in debt. And the fact that it's not just how they spend their money, but also how they spend their time. And it's a game that's got a lot of humor in it, and the kids love it. I've won lots of awards, but the greatest award for me is when I see a teen play it and the lights turn on. They get, very aware of the vocabulary of money. They start to understand what assets and liabilities are. Mm-hmm. And then we have other programs where we teach young people how to be entrepreneurs. We have a biz kit, because it's so important. The gift of financial education is the gift of a lifetime.
It is.
Once a child knows how to make money on their own, they're set. They can do it at any point in time. They're no longer intimidated by money. They become a master of their money, and that truly is, my goal is to provide the tools for people to become masters of their money and not slaves to their money.
Well, let's go to this book, Think and Grow Rich for Women. Now, you've written a lot of books about how to manage money for people in general, but this is specifically for women, so why specifically focus on women?
Well, thank you for that question. Yes, many of your listeners, I'm sure, have heard of the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, mm-hmm. if they haven't read it. It is the quintessential book on success and finance and personal development. It was published in 1937, and Napoleon Hill spent his life researching for that book, and he interviewed over 500 of the most successful people of his time. Of course, they were all men, because at that time the titans of business were all men.
Right.
And he also interviewed many, many thousands of people who considered themselves failures. And so the power of Think and Grow Rich is still as powerful today as it was back then, because it was the thesis, the term paper of success. It wasn't one man's philosophy. And so he boiled it down into the 13 principles of steps of success. And I read it when I was 19, and I've read it hundreds of times since then. But as I see women at a tipping point now in business, and we can talk about that in a minute, I started to realize that even though the principles of success are still the same, and they're the same for men and women tend to approach those principles very differently. So I wanted to review Think and Grow Rich through the eyes of successful women, and I have over 300 women in the book.
Wow. That's a large sample. Well, you interview some of the top women, like or you talk about Oprah, for instance, and her struggle. Strangely enough, you don't think of her struggling, but you talk about her struggle to get back on top.
Well, and it is so true, and that's part of the opportunity to really share. Is we think of successful women, and they go, you think, well, easy for her to say. I could never be there, I could never do that. And one of the biggest issues for women is that lack of self-confidence. And so by sharing the fact that someone as incredibly successful as Oprah herself still has issues at times with struggling with self-confidence, it really opens the opportunity for young women and women today to understand that they're not alone. And that was really the purpose of the book. There's so much dialogue today that's negative, where women are criticizing or complaining, criticizing each other, and that really, my hope for this book is to provide an opportunity at a catalyst to stop the complaining, stop the criticizing, and start celebrating each other, start celebrating the accomplishments that women have made.
Well, here in the first part of your book, you have an amazing set of statistics about women's control of money in America, and that's quite eye-opening. Could you review those numbers?
Well, certainly. Well, women in America control over 60% of the personal wealth, and over the next 3 decades, we're going to globally inherit $3 trillion. And we make 85% of all consumer decisions and probably have a pretty strong level of influence on all of them. Mm-hmm. And so it's our responsibility, since we have so much power, to make sure that we are properly educated to use that power. And the greatest way to do that is to educate ourselves. But so many times people feel like they're alone in the world, and we're not. We need to reach out and get together a group of other women and start studying together, get the book Think and Grow Rich for Women, and start doing a bit of a study behind it, because there's so much opportunity that we have. When you look at just women over 50, we have a combined net worth of $19 trillion.
Wow.
And so it's really, we spend $7 trillion every year, women. Mm-hmm. So we have a real opportunity and a real responsibility. More than 50% of college graduates are women. For instance, there's 140 women to every 100 men that graduate with education. And then in the corporate world, we've probably heard where there's a complaint that we only have 24 women CEOs in Fortune 500. In fact, it was 23 when I wrote the book, but right now it's 24%. And so there's a complaint about that, and I want to change the dialogue. I want to change it to the fact that there were only 2 in the year 2000. So let's celebrate that we have 24. And do we need more? Of course we do, but let's celebrate the progress that's been made.
Yeah, it's enormous progress as compared to, when Napoleon Hill was writing.
Oh, absolutely. At a time when there were very few women in business, and those that were primarily nurses and teachers. And so we have unique talent, because when Napoleon Hill was writing, and it was during the industrial age, it was a time when business was a very competitive environment, dog eat dog, and it was definitely a man's world. And as we see the world of business changing today, it's become a much more collaborative, much more cooperative environment where women and men can work together, and women are natural collaborators. And so we look at business as through strategic partnerships, strategic alliances. So what a great opportunity for women to stand up and be at the table, just to be present. Because the book Think and Grow Rich for Women, while it's for women, is not a male-bashing book at all. I want us to be highlighting those men who are champions for women and who recognize the talent, because when you combine the unique strength and talent of men with the unique strength and talent of women, that's when you can truly make incredibly progress economically.
In your own life, have you had a point like Oprah where you kind of lost sight of your own strength?
Many times, yes. Mm-hmm. I think, it's natural. Women tend to have a self-confidence issue. There was a time in my business life where I stayed in an environment that was not very healthy for me. And it took me a couple of years for me to wake up and realize, wait a minute, this is not what I need to be doing. I need to stand in my own power. I need to be true to my own personal mission. And sometimes it's hard. It's hard to make those decisions, and it's hard. But then all of a sudden you realize that when one door closes, another door opens. And when I decided to leave the company that I had built, that's when I got the call from President Bush. That's when I got the call from the Napoleon Hill Foundation, asking me to step in and help them with some projects in 2008. So it can be a gut-wrenching decision, but as Napoleon Hill said, out of every adversity, every failure, comes the seed of an equal or greater benefit. And truly, it happens all the time. I made a decision at the age of 26 to leave public accounting and to go into entrepreneurship, and it was the absolute worst decision of my business life. It was I went into a situation that was within just a few months I realized I'd made the bad mistake. But that decision allowed me to meet my husband. If I had not, and we're just about to celebrate 34 years of marriage, so I don't regret making that bad decision.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the things I'd like to get you to talk about is suppose that you are, let's say, a woman of 26, that you're talking to a woman who's 26 and her financial situation is a bit of a mess and she wants to, get hold of her life and move it in the right direction. What are some of the things you would say to her about her financial life?
Well, again, the first step is to figure out where you are financially. Mm-hmm. And we can be comical and say if you're in a deep financial hole, the first thing you need to do is stop digging. Mm-hmm. And that's, it's very difficult to change your habits. And that's something that we totally address in Think and Grow Rich for Women. We talk about how we can get into these cycles. And we get into cycles that are, habits can be good or bad. And the issue is to recognize your bad habits and start setting course. And what happens, a lot of people say, okay, I'm going to change it. And for instance, let's use a weight analogy. I want to lose 50 pounds. Well, 50 pounds may sound like a pretty hard goal to attain. But if you say, I'm going to lose 5 pounds, and then when you achieve that, you celebrate with, I call them little wins. Mm-hmm. And so you start creating attainable goals within the structure of a larger goal, and it helps you build that self-confidence. So, mm-hmm. for instance, that young girl of 26 may be facing $25,000 of credit card debt. Mm-hmm. And I go, well, let's look at all your credit cards, and let's find the one that has the lowest balance. And it may be $500. Well, let's pay that one off and celebrate the fact that you now have one less credit card. And that's going to give you confidence and motivation to start chipping away at the next credit card. So it's very important to analyze yourself and say, okay, how can I best motivate myself to keep going in the direction that I know I need to go?
So what you say is if they knock out the little card first, they get a victory right away, and they begin to benefit from that momentum.
It builds your self-confidence. It makes you more aware of the feeling of being able to say, I did it, mm-hmm. and it gives you motivation to keep going.
I know for me, when I was younger and I first got the discipline to, create a true savings account with investments and everything, just the fact that I had that, I didn't have much money in it, $3,000 or $4,000 in the beginning, but I never wanted to touch it. Even if I could, I'd say, well, I could use this for a weekend getaway, but then I'd give up on that idea because I didn't want to touch it.
That's a great point. I tell people, when you put your money in your savings account or in your investment accounts, think of it as an employee. Mm-hmm. That's an employee working for you. When you're not, that's something that you put in that account, and that's going to grow for you. So don't ever touch it. Allow those employees to work themselves silly for you and grow.
I like that. That's great. That is really good. You want to hold on to your employees and make
that's
them
right.
work for you. Yes, that's very good. So do women relate to money differently than
Oh, absolutely.
men?
That's a great question. One of the things that is slightly different from the original Think and Grow Rich, when Napoleon Hill wrote it, he was very money-focused, money-centric when he talks about the level of success. And typically men do tend to look at success through the eyes of dollars and cents or position titles. And women tend to look at success a little differently. My definition of success is how you feel about yourself when you look in the mirror, and it has nothing to do with the physical reflection. Is how do you feel? Do you feel like you've added quality to your life and those around you? And so that's why I added the subtitle, Using Your Power to Create Success and Significance. Mm-hmm. And as I paraphrased his words of wisdom, instead of just saying come up with the amount of money you want to make, I go come up with the amount of money you want to make or the difference that you want to achieve mm-hmm. in creating your goals. And I think that speaks much more loudly and much more intimately to women.
Well, I was surprised that you had Mother Teresa in a book on Growing Rich. It seemed, I said, well, what is she doing in here? But you make a good case.
She was definitely rich in spirit, don't you believe?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And she had tremendous burning desire. Her burning desire was to eradicate poverty. and to bring faith to those that had none. And I think she was tremendously successful in what her burning desire was. And that's, I had her in the book on purpose because, success is truly what you desire to achieve in life. And there's nobody more successful than Mother Teresa when you look at it from that perspective.
And she knew that she needed money to do the good she wanted to do.
Yes, absolutely. But she took none of it for herself. She was a tremendous testament in giving back and really philanthropy.
I remember years ago I worked for a pharmaceutical company, and the manager of that company was celebrating the notion that we were about to launch a drug that would very likely be the first billion-dollar drug in terms of worldwide sales. And I was asking him why we always focused on the money we would make and rather than the good we would do. And he said, well, if we didn't focus on the money, we wouldn't be here to do any good for anyone. He said the money is just a tool for doing the good we want to do. And that seems to be at least one thread of your book.
Oh, absolutely, definitely. I mean, I'm not saying that all women are saints by any means. And I'm also not saying that all men only focus on money.
Right.
So any generalization typically gets me in trouble. But
yes.
I think when you're talking about, as I grew up, my father would ask me each night, "Have you added value to someone's life today?" And that really, from a standpoint of the world we live in, and being able to ensure that we get the economy back on track and we start really taking control of our own lives and help others with a hand up instead of a hand out. It's really important to think of just if we can each start being more givers and supporting others and adding value to other people's lives each and every day.
Well, women are more traditionally philanthropists, are they not?
Well, women tend to be stronger in empathy. We tend to be greater at problem solving. And, of course, we have that nurturing aspect just from our maternal makeup. And so philanthropy is a natural state for women. I think a lot of women find their business passions through philanthropy.
Something I always admired is the concept of, since I'm around universities, the university endowment, where people come in and they endow a cause, something that they personally believe in. And rather than giving $100,000, once, they just set up an endowment, and that money works for that good for hundreds of years and grows. And I think it's a beautiful way of serving the mission that you have for yourself.
The word that it brings to mind is sustainability. So it gives you, it's not just a one-hit wonder in essence, it's something that provides for lifelong and even post your life, giving to a cause that you're passionate about.
Your book goes through the various things that a person needs to do, in this case a woman needs to do, but it would work for men as well, in getting control of their money and the control of their destiny via their money. And you talk about imagination. So what do we need to know about imagination to move forward?
Well, one of the things that I talk about in here, and I'll bring around to imagination, is one big life and the work balance guilt trip that women get themselves on. And what happens is we are so busy taking care of everybody else that we typically put ourselves at the end of the list. And in doing so, we have very little quiet time. And it's during that quiet time that your imagination can help create and help give you opportunities and ideas for great business ideas. And so you need to find that quiet time so that you can think of things that you can do. For instance, I teach that the greatest and most successful businesses do one of two things: solve a problem or serve a need. We certainly have enough problems and enough needs in our world that there's an awful lot of business opportunities. But unless you have time that you allow your imagination to work and be creative and problem solve and use those innate strengths and talents that women have, you're not going to be able to allow yourself to have that imagination work for you. And so that's a very important element The greatest, most valuable things on earth are intellectual property, patents, copyrights, trademarks, ideas that generate billions of dollars for the economy and for the future of our world. So our imagination is very valuable. I talk about the most important real estate you have is the 6 inches between your ears, but you have to allow it to operate.
You also talk about you have a lot of really good examples of contemporary women who have who have made magnificent wealth for themselves in a short term just by creative imagination. And the Inventor of Spanx is one such story.
Yeah, Sarah Blakely. She's the youngest woman billionaire. And she was looking for something to wear her beige pants and not show her panty lines. And in doing it, she created Spanx, and she was very passionate about it. And it took her several years to get it off the ground, but then it exploded because she was definitely solving a problem and serving a need.
Oh, well, yes. I think her example is particularly powerful because, so many people have an idea. We all see it around the kitchen table. Some cousin throws out an idea and people immediately say, no, that'll never work, and that's the end of it. They kill it right there. And she wouldn't let it be killed. She no doubt heard no. She even said she heard no hundreds of times, but she believed. That's
right, and that's part of the element of understanding success and achieving success in your life is having faith in yourself, having faith in your idea, and having faith in what you are doing. In my book, 3 Feet from Gold, which was my first book with the Napoleon Hill Foundation, we revealed the personal success equation, which is combining your passion and your talent. So, for instance, my passion is the need for financial literacy, financial education. My talent is my background as a CPA, my background in publishing. And then finding the right association, finding those people that can support you, that can fill your weaknesses with their strengths, and that will be your champions and your advisors in creating success and taking the right actions. And we almost went to press with that as a formula, but then I realized that the people that we really interviewed had gone through some pretty dire times, and what gets you through the difficult times is faith, having faith in yourself, having faith in what you're doing, and having faith in the fact that it's needed. And that's certainly demonstrated by Sarah's history, and the fact that she had faith that this is something that every woman wanted, but it took a long time to get it through.
Tell me about the Napoleon Hill Foundation. You mentioned this several times in this interview. What is its purpose?
Certainly. Napoleon Hill died in 1970, but before he died, he set up a foundation which is still thriving today. It's located in Wise, Virginia, and the foundation raises money, and certainly a large percentage of the proceeds from Think and Grow Rich for Women goes to the Napoleon Hill Foundation. They sponsor programs within universities that teach the basic principles of Think and Grow Rich. They sponsor programs in prisons to help people that are about to be released get the tools that they might need to be able to succeed so they don't end up back in prison. And they sponsor programs for young people and children, and they endow several different scholarship programs at the University of Virginia, and they have a World Training Center at Purdue University. And so they are constantly working to reignite and to really make sure that Napoleon Hill's principles of success are engaged and understood by the next generation.
So they teach in prison. I find that really interesting.
Yes.
I used to teach college courses in a prison, and my prisoners, so to speak, not mine, but the prisoners I taught, they'd often say that little saying. They said, "Those without the capital get the punishment." So they were aware that lack of money was doubly responsible. A lot of times poverty is one reason that puts them in that direction, and then lack of good advocacy on their part once they're arrested.
And some of them are so bright and so wonderful, and they were just casualties of our public education system at times, where they were too bright for the school that they were in, and they found other ways to entertain themselves and ended up in prison. So,
that's very true. That's very true, because I have taught kids in alternative programs that were, the troubled kids, as I said, and the one thing I saw in them, extremely bright, extremely creative by and large. Not every single one, but some of the brightest kids I've ever known were those that were tossed out of regular school systems.
Yeah, they become disengaged because they're no longer challenged and it's really something that's a shame.
Well, Sharon, I know you have to go. I know you have a lot of interviews today, but thank you so much for joining us. It's a wonderful book, Think and Grow Rich for Women, and I think it'll be a big hit, and it will also do a great deal of good.
Thank you so much. I invite everybody to come to thinkandgrowrichforwomen.com.
Okay.
Obviously, they have the opportunity to purchase the book through Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but at that site, thinkandgrowrichforwomen.com, there are also some tools and some resources to add value to the reading experience.
Thinkandgrowrichforwomen.com.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Great to have that. Well, you have a great day. Good talking to you. Best of luck.
Well, you are fantastic. Thank you so much.
That's it for this week's edition of Good Books Radio. The book again is Think and Grow Rich for Women by Sharon Lechter. Pick it up today or download it. I'm Dr. W.F. Strong for Good Books Radio, thanking audiobooks.com, where your first book is free, for underwriting this program. Have a good day.